Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping straight into a film that, well, it definitely gets people talking.
Oh, yeah. Loads of opinions on this one.
We're talking about the 2010 live-action movie of Avatar, The Last Airbender.
A film that, especially if you love the animated series, is, well, it's quite something to unpack. A real case study.
It really is. And look, you probably already have feelings about this movie. Most people do.
Definitely not alone there.
So our goal today isn't just to rehash old complaints. We want to really dig into why it landed the way it did, why it felt so off for so many.
And to do that, we've been looking at some really sharp analysis out there, particularly from, online critics and video essayists who've spent a lot of time breaking it down.
Exactly. Channels like Movie Flame, Just Right, Hello Future Me, Pointless Hub, they've all done deep dives themselves.
Yeah. Their work gives us a great foundation for understanding the common criticisms.
Okay, so let's lay out the main issues that kept coming up in those big picture stuff.
Go for it.
Well, first, there's this feeling that it just didn't get the original series. A lack of respect for the source material, maybe?
It comes up a lot. Yeah.
Then major problems with the writing, especially how it spoon feeds you information, the exposition.
Oh, the exposition. We'll have things to say about that.
Definitely. Third, the directing choices, action scenes, the overall pacing, even just how shots were put together. Some odd choices there.
Things that didn't quite fit the Avatar vibe, you could say.
And finally, the characters. How they were portrayed just didn't seem to click for a lot of people. Felt flat or just wrong.
Yeah, fundamental misunderstandings of who these characters are.
So that's the plan. We're going to dive into each of these using specific examples that these critics highlighted.
Sounds good. Where do you want to start? The source material aspect.
Yeah, let's start there. Disrespecting the source material. One huge example often brought up is Adang's reaction, when he finds out about the air nomad genocide.
That's a heavy moment in the show.
Yeah.
Foundational for him.
Totally. It's this massive trauma, this source of guilt and grief that drives so much of his character, right?
Absolutely. It defines his journey in many ways.
But in the film, critics point out that when he's talking about running away, the act that saved him, ironically, he's almost smiling.
Yeah, it comes across as weirdly lighthearted, like it wasn't a big deal.
It just completely misses the weight of it. It misunderstands his whole motivation, his whole arc, that trauma is...
It really undercuts everything. His running away wasn't casual. It was tied directly to that loss he'd eventually discover.
And it's not just Anang. What about Zuko and Iroh? That relationship is so core to the show.
Oh, absolutely. One of the best parts.
Remember that incredible scene at the end of book 1? Where Iroh finally tells Zuko, think of you as my own son.
Oh, yeah. So powerful. Really shows the depth of their bond.
Well, analysis points out that moment completely gone in the movie.
Seriously, they cut that.
Cut it.
Yeah.
And replaced it with Iroh nagging Zuko about his uniform being crooked or something.
You're kidding.
Nope. And the craziest part, they apparently kept Zuko's line, I know, Uncle, but attached it to the uniform comment.
Oh, no. That just drains all the meaning out of it.
Completely.
Yeah.
It takes this huge emotional beat and just throws it away on something totally trivial.
That's a baffling choice. It's not just omitting it, it's actively replacing it with something that undermines Iroh's character too, his wisdom.
Right. And speaking of Iroh, there's another moment people point to, the moon spirit scene.
In the North Pole.
In the show, he gives this incredibly passionate defense of the spirit, showing his deep respect for life, for balance.
Yeah, it really underscores who he is, his philosophy.
But in the film, that passion just feels kind of muted, watered down. It doesn't land the same way.
Another missed opportunity to show, not just tell, his character.
And how Aang reveals he's the Avatar. That's another point of contrast.
Okay, that was so.
In the show, it often comes out naturally during action, right? Like he does some amazing bending and it clicks.
Yeah, it's usually integrated into the situation. It feels earned.
But the film turns it into this separate, kind of stiff dialogue scene. And the weirdest part, Aang doesn't even say it.
Wait, who does?
Sokka and Katara's grandmother announces it for him.
Really? That takes all the agency away from Aang. It's his identity.
Exactly. It makes the reveal feel less impactful, less personal, kind of steals his moment.
Yeah, that's another strange choice.
And one last thing on the source material point, the overall plot of book 1.
Okay.
A lot of analysis highlights how the show has a really clear goal from the start. A film needs to get to the Northern Water Tribe to find a master. That's the engine driving them.
Right. It gives them direction, purpose.
But in the film, critics argue, there's not really a plan. They just seem to wander around for ages.
So less focused.
Yeah, and then when they do head north, the reason's different. It's not about finding a master anymore. It's suddenly about saving the moon spirit.
What, isn't that revealed way later in the show? Like right at the climax?
Exactly. The movie apparently brings it up way too early, changing the whole motivation and messing up the story's pacing and build-up.
Wow. Okay. So fundamental changes to character moments, relationships, and even the core plot structure.
Seems like it. Just prioritizing plot points over, like, how they unfold naturally.
Okay, so that leads pretty naturally into the writing itself, doesn't it? Especially the exposition you mentioned earlier.
Oh, definitely. This was a huge point in many critiques. The sheer amount of telling, not showing.
The reliance on narration and characters just explaining everything.
Yes. Especially Katara's narration. Critics pull out examples like her saying, "Father's off fighting in the war," or "We arrived at the Northern Water Tribe." Stuff that's just obvious.
Like the movie doesn't trust you to figure anything out. Someone joked it was like watching a Wikipedia article read aloud.
Haha, yeah, that captures it. It just strips away any chance for the audience to, engage and discover.
And it's not just the narration, right? It's the dialogue, too.
Yeah, critics describe the exposition as just awkward and wordy, sometimes throwing in details that don't even seem important at the time.
Lacks focus. Doesn't get the key info across effect.
And it's not just that there's exposition, but how bad it often is. Good exposition can be woven in visually or through arguments or even action, right? Think of films like Mad Max or Inception.
Sure, they build a world naturally within the story.
But here, it's mostly just characters standing still, reciting info, like reading from a script, no energy.
Yeah, static. And apparently sometimes repetitive too, or timed really weirdly.
Totally. Like Katara saying Aang's name before asking what it is. Little things like that just show a lack of care in the writing.
Floppy.
And attempts to add context sometimes just fall flat, too. Like, Zhao keeps mentioning raiding the Great Library.
Oh, yeah, which is a big deal in the show,
But in the film, it apparently has almost no context or relevance. It's just a name drop that doesn't connect to anything happening.
A detail lifted without its purpose. Happens a lot in adaptation.
And another writing issue pointed out is inconsistent. Right at the start, with Katara and Sokka finding Aang.
What about it?
Their personalities apparently flip-flop. Like, 1 minute Katara's reckless and Sokka's cautious. The next, it's switched. It makes it hard to get a handle on who they are.
Yeah, if you can't grasp their core traits from the beginning, it's tough to connect.
And the way the film handles emotional moments through exposition, also criticized.
How so?
Well, like telling the audience the air nomads were wiped out before we see Aang's reaction at the temple.
Oh, that definitely dampens the impact.
Yeah.
You want to experience his shock with him.
Right, and Monk Gyatso is apparently introduced way too late for his connection with Aang to really mean anything emotionally.
Undercutting the emotional beats by revealing information poorly.
Exactly. And finally, just awkward dialogue. Lines that just don't sound like things people would say.
Any examples stand out?
Critics mentioned Ozai explaining firebending using chi, or Avatar Kyoshi randomly saying she loves games. Just weird, unnatural lines.
Feels artificial. Doesn't help you suspend disbelief.
Okay, so bad writing, poor handling of source material. That brings us to the directing.
Night Shyamalan.
Yeah. And a lot of the analysis questioned if his style was really the right fit, coming from thrillers and horror.
Right. His films often rely on slow burns, small casts, atmosphere, twists, not exactly epic fantasy action.
Yeah, it's a very different skill set needed, isn't it? Even his tendency towards shorter films, like around 90 minutes.
Probably didn't help when trying to adapt a whole season of a rich show. Likely led to that rushed, condensed feeling.
Definitely. And the action sequence itself.
Yeah, I've heard things. The Earthbender prison scene.
Infamous. Critics describe it as just baffling. Earthbenders surrounded by tons of earth doing nothing.
Because they're depressed. Is that the official reason?
Apparently. It's just illogical. It breaks the world's own rules about bending.
And visually nonsensical too, right? Like firebenders only having tiny fires to work with, while earthbenders stand on infinite ammo.
Exactly. It shows a fundamental lack of understanding of how bending works.
So the choreography and logic were off. What about how it was filmed?
Well, another common critique is the overuse of long takes during action.
Instead of quicker cuts to build energy.
Right. Those long, unbroken shots just made the action feel slow, kind of sluggish and clumsy. Hard to follow sometimes.
Kills the momentum. You lose the impact.
The Blue Spirit escape scene is another example people bring up. In the show, it's super dynamic, shows teamwork.
And the film.
Flat, doesn't capture the energy, the skill, or that cool dynamic between Aang and Zuko.
Another missed opportunity.
And the special effect. For a big budget movie,
Yeah.
many critics felt the bending just looked unconvincing. Like huge martial arts moves producing a tiny puff of smoke or nudging a pebble.
Lacked scale, fluidity, impact, especially compared to the animation.
Even basic stuff like establishing shots or transitions, apparently handled weirdly. Odd use of dissolves, scenes ending abruptly on action shots.
Jarring, breaks the flow.
And revealing things clumsily, like the Fire Nation ship, just kills any suspense.
Just fundamental filmmaking choices that felt off.
Yeah. And another thing, the lack of life. Characters just standing around delivering lines.
Static, compared to the constant movement and energy of the animation.
Right. And where were Appa and Momo? They felt really sidelined.
Oh, man, yeah. They bring so much charm and humor. Big loss if they're underused.
And finally, on directing, weak introductions.
Yeah.
Especially Fire Lord Ozai.
The big bad. How did they mess him up?
Instead of that terrifying shadowy figure from the show, he's just some guy walking around. No menace, no real presence.
Doesn't establish the threat, makes the stakes feel lower.
Exactly. Which kind of leads us perfectly into the next big area, flawed characterizations across the board.
Yeah, if the villain falls flat and the heroes aren't right.
It's a problem. It seems like pretty much every main character lost something vital in the translation.
The nuance, the depth, just wasn't there.
Seems like. Let's start with Aang again. Critics argue he's just constantly scared. He lacks that joy, that playful spirit that's so important to his character, even with the weight he...
So just the trauma, none of the light.
Pretty much. And his whole internal conflict about responsibility feels underdeveloped, even contradictory. It doesn't track.
Yeah, the film struggled to show that complex journey he's on. It's not just about being scared, it's about overcoming it.
Exactly. And it makes his motivations feel kind of mopey, not determined.
Okay. What about Katara? You mentioned the exposition earlier.
Yeah, analysis suggests she was basically reduced to that. An info dump. Her warmth, her motherly side, her strong moral compass, mostly gone.
Loses her agency. She's supposed to be the heart of the group in many ways.
And so...
Let me guess, not.
Well, humor is apparently rare, and when it happens, it feels forced or jarring. And his arc, going from skeptic to strategist and believer, it just doesn't really happen.
So, no development. And the comedic relief, which is crucial in the show, falls flat.
Seems so. And Zuko and Iroh. We talked about that one specific scene, but the overall dynamic...
What wasn't there? The warmth, the mentorship.
Rikikse was largely absent. Very few meaningful interactions. And Zuko's internal struggle, that pull between honor and pleasing his father, not really explored properly.
Wow, that's such a core part of book one. His whole motivation. And Iroh's role in guiding him. If that's missing,
big chunk of the story's heart is gone.
Even minor characters suffer.
Yeah, Yu, for example. Her romance with Sokka felt rushed, underdeveloped. Her sacrifice at the end, the motivations weren't clear, lacked the emotional punch.
Another relationship that needed more time and care.
And circling back to Ozai, just zero menace, not imposing. A guy.
Fails to capture that terrifying presence he has in the animation, even when you don't see his face for ages.
Right. So if the characters are off, the plot has changed, the directing is weak, it makes sense that the themes got misinterpreted too.
Yeah, what about the deeper ideas, like pacifism?
Well, some critics argue the film presents Aang as just unable to hurt anyone, period, which misses the whole point of the show.
Right. The show explores the difficulty of the Avatar's role.
Yeah.
Sometimes they have to make hard choices, even violent ones, for balance. It's a complex struggle for Aang.
Exactly. The film simplifies it drastically, and the idea of balance itself...
Also simplified.
Yeah. Reduced to a basic message about hope overcoming oppression, apparently. It loses all the nuance, the deeper philosophical meaning it has in the series.
Lacks the depth. Shame.
So ultimately, all these failings had consequences, right? Beyond just being a bad movie.
What kind of impact did critics point to?
Well, that it really hurt the potential for the Avatar universe to be seen as a major franchise like Lord of the Rings or Star Wars levels of recognition and respect.
A missed opportunity to launch it into that stratosphere.
Yeah, it kind of damaged its cinematic potential significantly.
And probably felt like a slap in the face to the creators of the original show.
Well, that point was definitely made, that all their passionate, careful work was disregarded, mishandled.
A real shame given how beloved the original is.
Okay, let's wrap this up. We've gone through a lot of the specific criticisms.
Yeah, quite the list of issues.
But the core themes coming through all the analysis are pretty consistent, aren't they? A fundamental misunderstanding of the source material.
Check.
Really poor execution in writing and directing.
Double check.
And just a basic failure to grasp what made the original show so special.
Yeah, it just didn't capture that magic, that essence. It failed on multiple levels.
So our goal here was to really explore the why behind the film's reception, drawing on those detailed critiques. Hopefully that's shed some light.
Definitely gives a clearer picture of the specific problem.
So maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. We see so many adaptations. What do you think is the secret sauce? What makes one work and another not?
Yeah, what's that vital element that truly captures the spirit of something beloved, beyond just hitting the plot points?
How do you translate something successful between what absolutely has to be preserved?
It's a tough question. It's about more than just faithfulness.
Yeah.
Right? It's about understanding the core appeal.
Definitely something to think about. And hey, if this whole discussion has made you curious, or maybe just reminded you of your frustration,
go watch the original animated series.
Absolutely. Or rewatch it. Experience that richness, that depth, that magic the film, well, didn't quite manage.
It really is something special.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.